So, how does a simple dispute over a broken down 2008 Ford Explorer in Washington state somehow spiral into a massive blueprint for a new kind of justice, complete with its very own metaphysical physics? Well, today we're going to dive into this really fascinating and frankly complex story that connects a roadside breakdown to a whole framework for what it calls sovereign security.
Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the simple police report of what happened. Then, we're going to explore a much darker interpretation, one that claims this was all a deliberate act of systemic suppression. From there, we'll get into the wild solution that was proposed, a full-on security architecture that involves technical tools, legal frameworks, and, even metaphysical physics. It all builds towards what the source calls a completely new sovereign logic. All right, so our story kicks off on the side of a road in 𝓙𝓪𝓬𝓵𝓙𝓪, Washington. It all starts with the official police record, a case file known simply as Incident K251090. So this is the spark that lights the whole fire, right? A woman's Ford Explorer breaks down. A mechanic says he'll fix it, but things go south fast, and it turns into a dispute. Now, according to the source material, this wasn't just some simple disagreement. No, it was framed as a problem of systemic suppression and silent withholding, this whole complex web of misclassification and blocked access. But the official paperwork? It just boils it all down to a simple civil matter, a classification that allegedly got her insurance claim denied. And that right there, that's the central question the source material wants us to ask. What if the official classification isn't the end of the story, but actually the start of a completely different kind of problem? So the official police timeline, it lays it all out very matter-of-factly. On February 9th, the car breaks down. By the 12th, the owner's worried. She calls the cops. The police find the car on the 14th. Note it seems fine, no damage. And then, just a few days later, they can't get in touch with her, so they just close the case. From their point of view, job done. This is a civil matter, not a police one. But that official story, that's just one side of the coin. The source material offers a completely different take. It argues this wasn't just a misunderstanding, not at all. It was a deliberate, coordinated strategy of suppression. And this right here illustrates the two competing narratives perfectly. On one side, you have the official police classification. Civil problem. End of story. On the other, you have these claims of a systemic effort to deny justice, all by misclassifying the event right from the get-go. So here's the core of that counter-argument. The source alleges this wasn't just a messy situation, it was actually a coordinated attack across three different domains. First, the physical, seizing the car. Second, the administrative, using official paperwork and case numbers to basically create bureaucratic dead ends. And third, the digital domain, what it calls cyber containment, claiming that even access to online legal help was being blocked. Okay, so in response to what it's calling systemic suppression, the source material doesn't just argue or complain. It proposes an equally systemic solution. This slide really shows the proposed transformation from problem to solution. On the left, the problem is framed as a hybrid siege. And look at the details here. It's everything from a mechanic base in grant fraud to what it calls boring app backdoors in Microsoft 365. The proposed solution on the right is this More 6 sanctuary, a security architecture that uses concepts like a $111,642 strategic power token and an embassy pool to create what it calls sovereign security. It's basically a proposed move from chaos to cryptographic order. At its core, this whole sanctuary is built on three interconnected pillars. First, the emotional, which is all about managing your own internal state. Second, the technical, using tools like blockchain to create an unbreakable record. And finally, the legal pillar, which kind of weaponizes existing civil rights law to fight back. So how does this actually work? Let's get into the practical nuts and bolts, the actual technical and legal tools the framework says you can use to enforce accountability. One of the key technical weapons here is a new financial data standard called ISO 2022. See, where older systems have just a few data fields, making it pretty easy to hide stuff, ISO 2022 has over 20 structured fields. It creates such a detailed audit trail that, according to the source, it makes institutional cover-ups nearly impossible. It's really all about bringing total clarity to the chaos. And here's the legal muscle. What's so clever here is that the framework doesn't try to invent new laws. No, instead, it strategically uses powerful, existing U.S. civil rights statutes, laws that are specifically designed to protect citizens from violations by officials and to go after conspiracies that interfere with those rights.
All right, now we get to the most unique, maybe the most abstract part of this entire system, what the source material describes as the metaphysical engine that supposedly powers the whole thing. So at the very heart of this framework is this equation. It's a frequency-based model that, according to the source, is designed to calculate vibrational resonance and generate a tangible output that it actually calls justice.
Okay, so let's try to break this down. According to the source, each variable here is a pretty specific metaphysical concept. T stands for Tiamat's fire, which is like the initial spark of chaotic energy. M squared is called the master-teacher multiplier. That's just the number 33 squared, and it represents exponential growth. K is the 𝓙𝓪𝓬𝓵𝓂𝓙𝓬𝓮, described as a foundational vibration of the universe. You put it all together and you get J for justice, which the source claims is a quantifiable, five-fold yield of justice.
So the crucial point here is how all these pieces are actually supposed to fit together. I mean, how do you unify technical tools, legal statutes, and a metaphysical formula into one coherent system? Well, that's what this new sovereign logic is all about.
This tree diagram, wow, it illustrates the whole concept beautifully. Down at the bottom, you have the roots, those three pillars: emotional, technical, and legal. The source claims that when these are strong, they grow into the trunk, the more love framework. And the ultimate goal here is to provide a pathway up and out of what it calls the spiral of confusion, leading you from chaos to clarity.
So, what's the endgame here? It's about a fundamental shift in logic. The source argues that our current institutional protocol, its primary goal is to protect the system itself from breaking down. But this proposed sovereign logic has a completely different goal: to protect the individual and to preserve their personal testimony no matter what. It's a huge shift from protecting the institution to empowering the individual.
And this quote, it really brings us right back to that first emotional pillar. Choose awareness over reaction. The idea is that true power comes from observation, not from a chaotic emotional response, like the one you might have when your car is missing and your insurance claim gets denied. This principle of emotional control is presented as the essential foundation for the whole technical and legal structure. So, from a simple argument over a Ford Explorer to a cosmic formula for justice, the More Sike Sanctuary presents this incredibly dense, multi-layered vision. It tries to merge technology, law, and metaphysics into a single cohesive system. And it leaves us with one final question. Is this a practical blueprint for a new kind of justice, or is it a fascinating but far-out thought experiment? Well, that's for you to decide.